Hello and welcome to a special edition of POLOTIKI brought to you by News 24. My name is Mahlasi. We're coming to you live from the ANC's 54th National Elective Conference here at the Nasrec Expo Center. The big day is finally upon us. We have rolling coverage of this epic battle between presidential candidates Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa and Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. As I've said, we've got reporters on the ground to give you all of the breaking news stories. We've got our resident analyst to give you in-depth analysis on the ins and outs of the ANC. And remember to stay tuned to News 24, as we'll also have live streaming of all of the open sessions inside the ANC's elective conference. For now, for the latest, I'm joined here on POLOTIKI by News 24 politics journalist Tshidi Madia. Tshidi, good morning and welcome to POLOTIKI.
Awesome. Hi, Mahlats. We're finally here.
We are finally here. Of course, the ANC's program says that things are supposed to get underway at 9 a.m., but we know that there's an emergency special National Executive Committee. Just give us details. What are they discussing at this point?
You know, yesterday we had 3 damning judgments coming out from different courts, one in KwaZulu-Natal, one in the Free State, and the other in the Northwest, impacting the Bujanala region in the Northwest. The ANC has to sit down and give expression and understand what does this mean. The NEC specifically, which is due to step down this weekend, has to try and give guidance to the political party, to the delegates who are here. When they go to plenary, they need to answer questions about what the impact of these particular affected provinces are as far as their role is concerned when conference is concerned. So the NEC, the National Executive Committee, will sit down, have discussions, and come up with a plan and answers for their party members.
I understand also that they've brought in their own legal experts to try and guide them, because there are provinces that are insisting, because we've lodged an appeal, those delegates that are affected should be able to come to conference.
Absolutely. The understanding is that when an appeal is underway, the ruling is then suspended. But you can't do that, because then if it's suspended and you have 37 branches or so, or even the 14 branches in the Free State then voting, what happens when it comes out that the appeal is not withheld and that the judgment remains? Because then that brings a question into the entire conference. The legitimacy of the conference. So they need to kind of figure that out and play that by ear. I mean, Zizi Kota earlier was telling us how, you know, they're going to mark certain delegates differently from the others. Some will suddenly become non-voting delegates. I spoke to Sitla Zigalala from the KwaZulu-Natal ANC, and he said, I'm here as a branch delegate, because the PEC was told remain out of office until an appeal can actually be heard. And he said, I'm not here as a PEC member. PEC has been removed from this process. I'm here just as a branch delegate from Million Mayua branch.
As Tshidi Madia was telling us, she earlier spoke to the ANC spokesperson Zizi Kodwa about all of these problems that they're encountering. Let's take a listen. As we prepare for that audio clip, that video clip from the ANC spokesperson Zizi Kodwa, I continue with our politics journalist Tshidi Madia. As we've said, POLOTIKI will be here throughout the conference. We will be live from 9 until 10 a.m. Throughout the conference, which ends on Wednesday. But the big question is, when does it officially get underway? That clip with ANC spokesperson Zizi Kodwa is now ready.
Zizi, thank you so much for joining us. Let's just quickly get into the business of the delegates. They were registering at the UJ yesterday. Has that been completed?
It is now completed. There were a few issues that we had to deal with. Remember, there were some replacements which were done not in accordance, and therefore it was important that we allow that and deal with them at the end of the registration with affected provincial leadership. It's not so much, remember, there's a certain number. You won't change or replace above certain percentage per province, but that must be done. We're in consultation with certain processes of the organization. That is done. We think we should start on time, except that, like you indicated in one of your reports, that we are meeting in a special meeting of the NEC. We would have met in any way, whether there were judgments or not, because the NEC is a custodian in this meeting, until we are called off stage by elections agency. So we would have met to get an update on registration. We would have met to see the health of our delegates on their way, what happened, where did they sleep, so that we must provide leadership at the plenary. We don't allow the plenary to interpret its own understanding of what the court judgments meant, for example. We don't allow people who do not sleep well, that they must raise issues at the plenary. Those issues are attended to.
What else is going to come up in that NEC? You are correct. We did expect the courts to be at the center stage, but even about the courts, what is expected in terms of discussions around it?
The judgments are not about the national conference, and it's important to appreciate that. That's why.
But it impacts the national conference.
There is no bearing to the national conference because they are provincial specific. They are regional specific. For example, in Bujanala, it's a regional conference. The regions don't participate. They've got no status at this conference. We did not invite them, except we invited two per region as observers. But you've got branches, about 38 of them, which now the province has said it is appealing. What is the status of that legal of those branches who are already here? It does not affect the 90% of the branches that are expected to be here. So it will have no bearing to that. The KwaZulu-Natal, I think it's a straightforward matter. Majority of the PEC members, fortunately, they are branch delegates. They will participate here because that decision has got nothing to do with branches. Free State is a similar matter. We are dealing with that issue. The reason we are dealing with those issues, it's not so much they've got direct bearing to the conference, but we must provide leadership at the plenary because the plenary may raise these questions. What does it mean in terms of provincial specific and regional specifics?
And then let's quickly speak about the numbers as well. Going back to the numbers, in terms of the delegates who've been accredited, where does the number sit at this point in time?
You won't be able to give that until the registration itself is done completely. I must answer the question you have not asked. Because whenever it's asked about delegates, they're looking in terms of numbers, in terms of judgments. How does it affect that? For us, it's not about how this judgment affects a certain number of a certain group. It's about the credibility of this process. I must say upfront, the ANC will comply with judgments. There is no reason why the ANC, for any reason, it will not comply. However, we will use the remedies and the recourse provided for where it is necessary to appeal.
What happens to the delegates who are impacted by the court judgments, who are already here? Do you mark them differently? Do they become non-voting delegates? What happens inside plenary with those people?
The precedents in Mangaung in 2012, we color-coded the PEC of Free State, which was affected as well. So this déjà vu for Free State. We color-coded them as participating delegates. In other words, full right to participate in commissions in the plenary, but not voting, because it affects the credibility of voting process.
And just lastly, for our users, just quickly give us a breakdown of what's expected to happen today.
At about 9:09, we expect the president, the program to commence officially with messages of support, with interface and so on. At around 10, the president will deliver a political report. A political report must give an account of 2012 and now. Politically, what is the state of the organization? What are the challenges? What are the achievements? And around afternoon, we'll then receive credentials, which I think that is the work that everybody is looking at. After that, we'll take nominations. For your viewers and the listeners and the reporters, it's important that to inform them that the nomination and the voting has now been changed. Originally, the proposed formula was to vote per position. We'll now nominate for top 6. So at about between 3 and 5, we should be taking nominations for top 6. For the top 6, and then tomorrow in the morning we should be able to get announcement of the new leader and leadership of the ANC top 6.
Now, Zizi, the ANC is notorious for not being on time. You're telling me at 9 o'clock the president will deliver his political report, yet there is an NEC meeting that's sitting at 8 o'clock, is it not?
The ANC is notorious of being on time.
Never.
I know you as a journalist that I've never failed to be on time in terms of...
At media briefings at Lutuli House, however, conference is notoriously known for running extremely late.
You are talking about 6,000 people. To coordinate them from different hotels and so on, it may not be an easy task, but we will start.
So ultimately, you're confirming that you will not be starting on time. Thank you so much for your time.
ANC spokesperson Zizi Kodwa speaking there to our politics journalist CD Media. Zizi, in a way, is trying to play down the challenge, but we know we've counted about 100 votes that could be lost by Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, because we know that the provinces that are supporting her are the ones that are impacted. And we're expecting that there's going to be a real battle to try and make sure that those 100 votes sit.
Absolutely. I think he has no choice but to try and play down the challenges facing the ANC. At this particular conference, there are plentiful, and it's the fear of the court's judgments that's been accompanying a lot of other delegates on their way to conference. Some saying our only concern is that conference might not actually sit because of court judgments, and we've seen what's happened now, so they now need to find a way forward. But I must tell you that those Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma supporters, Dr. Dlamini-Zuma supporters, are also trying to show, you know, a brave face and pretend they're not worried, but they actually are. You can almost feel, you know, the duck that's paddling aggressively underneath the water surface, but seemingly cool and calm at the top. That's what it feels like. A lot of them saying, yeah, victory's still certain,
the numbers.
You've got the numbers, and you're like, but you don't. how provinces have been adversely affected. You can't ignore 30 plus branches in Bujanala are not voting. You can't ignore PEC members in the Free State. And when the PEC members become branch delegates, they're eating away at the branch delegates. So you can't ignore the impact of the courts on this particular conference. It's there. The one thing that the ANC has insisted is that in spite of everything else that's happened, they met threshold. 90% was long met, 75% rather was long met. Whatever happens going forward is not an issue with regards to quorum. That one has been done. They've had people register. That's done. Whatever happens going forward, we'll see. But then we must worry what the Nkosana Dlamini-Zuma people are going to say, because they feel like they're targets. The ANC Youth League President Colin Maine telling News 24 last night, that he feels that Nkosana Dlamini's provinces, the ones that are in support of it, have been targeted. I mean, he blames the judiciary, saying that they've become extremely political. So you've got those people who are angry already, pretending to be cool and calm. So one wonders, what will they do at the end? People from the CR17 camp are breezing through conference. They're confident. They're dancing away. They're happy. They're saying the works of the devil is coming undone. They're excited about the way forward.
Interestingly, we also spoke to Dr. Matolo Mutsecha, who is in the Cyril Ramaphosa campaign, and he was insisting that, all of these court judgments are showing that who of these two camps are not interested in clean governance.
Absolutely. They view everything that's happened as a positive sign for Cyril Ramaphosa. I mean, last night, President Jacob Zuma speaking at the gala dinner saying, he's stepping down, his deputy is also stepping down, and then he says, but he's returning, so I'm told. So it'll be interesting to see what, by Sunday we'll have an ANC president. It'll be interesting to see who emerges
as the ANC president. Of course, that was our politics journalist, Tidi Madia, joining us here on Polotiki. The ANC is insisting that by Sunday we will know who is the new ANC president. But as things stand, an NEC, a National Executive Committee meeting, is currently underway, and we are expecting quite a fierce battle when it comes to credentials. The conference cannot go ahead until credentials are actually adopted. There's been all sorts of rumors. Other people saying that there's been attempts at vote buying. There's been attempts at changing delegates that were chosen by branches, by certain leaders. So quite an interesting day is going to be here. Earlier on, I spoke to the ANC Gauteng chairperson, Paul Mashatile, who, despite all of these challenges, is excited and looking forward to this conference, insisting that it will actually go ahead. Let's take a listen. Thank you very much for joining us. The day has finally arrived.
Indeed, this is a big day that all South Africans are waiting for. We are very excited as Gauteng that we have the opportunity to host this important conference of the ANC. I'm aware that all provinces are now here. By 2-3 a.m., some of them were still registering. Of course, as a host province, we decided that we should be the last. So we didn't have much sleep, but we are very happy that things went smooth. A bit of a challenge to register so many people, but I'm hoping that conference will start properly this morning.
But of course, you're also going into a special National Executive Committee meeting, given all of the court judgments that we have seen yesterday, basically saying some of the delegates from the Free State, from KZN, and also from Bujanala in the Northwest cannot attend this conference. Your reaction to those judgments?
Well, we will respect the judgments of the courts. Obviously, what we need to do as the ANC is really to tighten up our procedures, because often these issues in courts have to do with our own procedures, whether we have followed our constitution properly and the resolutions that we have taken about who should be at the BGM, who should be at the PGC, who should be at the provincial conference, who should be at the national conference. So it's a lesson to us as a leadership of the ANC that tighten up the rules and follow them to the latter.
And what should happen? I mean, others have argued that because there's appeals that are being lodged, the status quo remains, but others have said that allowing those delegates to be here brings into question the legitimacy of the conference and might actually delay credentials being adopted.
Well, the NEC is going to meet at 8 this morning, and amongst others is to look at those interpretations. Often when there are court judgments, you find different interpretations. But I think the best thing is that those with legal minds must help us. At the very least, we need to do the right thing, because to ensure that the court judgments are interpreted properly. If a court judgment indeed suggests that a particular branch shouldn't be at conference, we should adhere to that, because otherwise you get challenged. And one of the things we shouldn't do is to put this conference into risk.
Just before I let you go, the last time we spoke, you were saying that the chairpersons were continuing to meet. That was on Thursday. Any outcomes from those meetings?
Well, so far I can say we have not found what we call consensus leadership, but I think the spirit of saying we need a united leadership is agreed to. All of us are preaching unity, we are committed, and we believe that delegates will take that into account as they go through voting.
That was the ANC chairperson in Gauteng, Paul Mashatile. Of course, he's saying that this conference should not be put at risk, basically saying that those delegates that have been excluded by those court judgments should not be present here. But also interesting, saying that the meetings that they have been having as ANC, as chairpersons, provincial chairpersons, have not yielded the so-called consensus leadership, that arranged leadership that was being talked about by Mpumalanga ANC provincial chairperson Didi Mabuza and his unity drive. But for in-depth analysis, I'm now joined here on Polotiki by our resident analyst Mpumelelo Mkabela and Ralph Mateja. Good morning, gentlemen, and welcome.
Morning.
Mpumi, deja vu. This feels like Mangaung all over again, but this time at a grand scale. In Mangaung, it was just the Free State all the way to the Constitutional Court, the court saying that the Provincial Executive Committee can't be part of the voting delegates here. But this time around, we've got two other provinces involved.
Yes, I mean, there are two ways of looking at it. There's the positive way and the negative way. On a positive side, you remember there was a time when the ANC actually shunned the idea of taking their matters to the courts. At some point, it was even a disciplinary matter that you have taken the ANC to court. They could charge you for that. They would threaten you that, how dare you take the organization to court. But since that judgment in 2012 in Mangaung, the Free State, the Ramakatsa judgment, I think that there's been acceptance that the ANC doesn't operate in isolation. It has got its own rules, but beyond that, there's also the constitution of the country, and its members and supporters are entitled to political rights under the Bill of Rights of the constitution of the country. So they have a right to political rights in the ANC, and the ANC can't control or bar them from participating in processes. So the positive side of it is that the ANC has accepted that its rules and regulations are subject to the constitution of the country, and therefore they can be adjudicated in court. On the negative side, though, it appears the ANC is not learning, because some of the things that are now coming to the court are things which, in a proper, well-functioning organization, could be resolved in internal dispute resolution mechanisms, because they are very basic. It's about how many branches, how many members attended the branch general meeting, did the branch general meeting collate, were all members informed on time,
were they all members in good standing?
It's basic thing that should not be going to court. So from that point of view, it's quite disappointing that 5 years later we have this kind of problems we're having, and having had time to fix these problems, the ANC doesn't seem to have done anything.
Are we surprised, though, Ralph, that the ANC is finding itself in this crisis on the day of conference?
Well, Matlet, I really think that this conference is in the mercy of the courts. That's just how it is. If it appears to me that members of the ANC who are disgruntled no longer have confidence in the internal processes of the party, the word consensus, I think, has got no place within the ANC as we speak. And the problem goes far back. The reality is that for a while, the ANC has been kicking the can down the road. I mean, they kicked the can down the road from Polokwane. They then went to Mangaung. They had disruptions in Mangaung. But what we've seen happening from Mangaung until where we are today, it is the perfection of the art of disruption, where they have actually learned how to go about it. And as Mpumi is saying, I think it is very positive that at least ANC members, some of them are saying that, hey, throwing a chair at each other is not good. I'm going to throw a court order at you. At least that's much better. That's a civilized way of differing for that matter. But I think that the bigger issue here is that you really need to reinstitutionalize the ANC. We've been speaking about this for quite a while. There is a clear awareness now within the ANC that you can talk as much as you want about OR Tambo. It's not going to solve the dispute within the ANC now. What you need to do is to change the institutions, allow for these processes to be openly, to be fair and so forth, allow for competition to take place from within the party. If some candidates want to spend money to campaign, regulate it. Don't stop it and tell us that it is not happening, because certainly bags of money might be making exchanges within the party thereof. So it is the party that has to reflect as to whether what is it that they need to do to modernize. The problems that they're having, I know some people have characterized it as greed and so forth. My view might sound cynical. I just think those are typical characters of a modern society. It happens everywhere else. Just sanction it. Make sure that you have institutions so that at least what you have, you've got fairness, competition and fairness. You cannot take away the reality that the type of cadres that ANC attract today are people who are ambitious, are some of the people who want to go ahead. Some of the people think that they can actually achieve something by saving from within the ANC. So you don't attract the same cadre today as you did while you fought against apartheid. It is a very different situation where we find ourselves.
Of course, we've heard all kinds of rumors in terms of the vote buying. Some have said that the price tag is about 100,000, but of course we have not seen real evidence as far as that is concerned. Mpumi, is this conference at risk of collapsing? We're expecting a heated battle in the NEC and later on at credentials.
That risk is ever present, and there's no question about that. I think the issue is whether, given its presence, whether the both factions are going to work towards making sure that they mitigate it. And in a way, even though the conference maybe might end up taking longer to complete, but at the very least, they can minimize the risk and contain the divisions. But the presence of that risk, there's no question about it. It's there. The other way is that you can force the conference to proceed with disputes not having been resolved. There's a possibility that it can conclude, but then afterwards, it can be collapsed post facto. In other words, its decisions can be nullified if the disputes are not resolved properly, or if some of the things are left out for people to challenge in court. So that's why it's important this morning, this NEC that's sitting now actually could be the solution, or it could be the problem, depending on
who has the numbers.
Outcome. Yeah, it could be the solution, it could be the problem. It could help the conference proceed nicely and even prevent a post facto challenge, or it could collapse the conference by way it decides. So the best thing is that have all the factions agree, at least at the minimum basic level, on what should happen, at the minimum. And if all of them are signed to that and they agree, then you can proceed with the conference.
Of course, we've looked at the provinces that are affected. These are key provinces for Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. Is this a big blow, or, 100 votes here, not there, she still stands a chance?
Look, it's about the narrative that she would like to drive, or her allies would like to drive out of this. This kind of judgments that have come forth against this, relating to these particular provinces, it could be turned around. There is a very strong anti-establishment narrative within the ANC. What that means is that you can actually turn this and flip the script and say, and actually use it to galvanize, to say that those who are there, who support Dlamini Zuma, she can drive the view that they're under siege and so forth, they need to vote and defeat this. So that narrative is there within the ANC. I think that what concerns me the most as well is that it appears to me that when members of ANC feel they're likely to lose a battle, they go straight into disruption. And what I fear also is that those who might feel they're losing, they might walk out to make sure they do not legitimize their loss, for that matter. And we know what they do when they walk out. It means that they're going to court. So, you have these three ways of interdicting. You can interdict the conference before it starts. You can wait for the credentials when they are being sorted. Just when they're about to be sorted, you raise a measure error issue saying you can't proceed. People might proceed. Let's say there is that agreement. Highly unlikely that you can have an agreement within the ANC. Let's say you have that near consensus to say, let us proceed on the basis of these basic rules. Then, in the middle of this, people start feeling the wind before they vote, that they are not doing well. Then they can walk out. They can vote and say that, you know what, let's give it a shot. But we have something at the back. We have got a legal standing. The reality is that for the first time in the ANC's history, I think, in modern times, there is sufficient ground for either factions to disrupt this. They don't have to even work hard. You don't even need an excellent lawyer to get this thing done. All you have to do is to go back to some of the cases pertaining to the regions and the provinces. And you can make a strong grand case that says that there is no way that one could arrive at the conclusion that the branches are in good order, and this conference is such that the preparations can lead to a fair and free. So I find it very difficult that some members of the ANC will avoid that maneuver, given what they've been doing all along coming to this. It will have to be some kind of a Holy Spirit reaching them not to disrupt this one. I just don't see it.
Divine intervention, divine intervention. For me, I mean, from Ralph's point of view, it's a conference at risk. You know, it could go literally either way.
I think one of the things we need to start interrogating is why the conference, as it really seems to be the case, it's at risk, and or its outcomes could be at risk of being challenged. I think the issue is really what is at stake here. It's really a do-or-die conference situation because people are facing criminal charges.
Yeah.
Charges have been laid, I mean, the last 6 months or so. So many cases have been opened against, some of them against cabinet ministers for all kinds of different roles they've played in state capture. Cases lodged by opposition parties, civil society groups, and all of that. And those cases are not cold, necessarily. They are alive. They're just waiting for a leadership that can set the tone.
And say, go for it.
Go for it.
Or maybe even a different prosecutor there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there is that. But there is also the other ever-present problem in the ANC, the issue of tenders, which is now, it has always been there. The difference now is that we've got state capture, which is much more grander, much bigger than the issue of tenders. So people promise each other all kinds of tenders, that if we win this conference, we run this government, these contracts are yours, and all of that. That's why some of these people that are here are sponsored by certain entrepreneurs who want to see a particular outcome. So the ANC has become a site for battle, for money, for power, for influence, and all that kind of stuff. So whereas we might be debating issues of principles about branches, are they correcting, do we have the right delegates here? But actually, those are proxy issues.
Yeah.
The real issues is state capture. The real issues is tenders. The real issue is influence, is state money. That's the problem.
I think that ever-present fear of jail is what is motivating some of these legal challenges that we've seen, or desperate attempts to manipulate the processes. And of course, later on, we're going to be talking about the legacy of President Jacob Zuma, because it is a presidential race, but one of the important things that is happening is that he is stepping down as the ANC president, and we'll get a little bit into that. Ralph, from Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, you know, the people that are affected by allegations of state capture, there are people in her camp. The people that, the provinces that are affected by all these disputes are people in her camp. Surely that is not how a presidential candidate journey to the presidency would like to be.
Certainly, I mean, if you look at the crisis of corruption within the country, it is so difficult, actually, that when you look at the people that Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma aligned herself with. But also, this is politics, again. It is politics, and she stood no chance, probably, of even running had she not went into that camp. And the only hope, and, you know, hope doesn't count very much in politics, however, but the only hope is that if she wins, maybe she will extricate herself from those people. But also when you look at the nature, the intricacies, and the network of corruption, it's going to be such a cost. It's going to be, actually, if she tried to renege on trying to protecting them, if she wins, if she tries to renege from that, certainly they will recall her through the party, because it's not just about the president here. She's going to become the president. If she doesn't have allies within
the top 6 and the NEC
who are credible, therefore, yeah, within that, she's going to be in trouble. The question is, what is it that she's likely to give if she wins, to say to them that, fine, this is the deal. You are no longer getting 20%, okay? We settle for 10% of tenders. We need to do something for the country. The premium for corruption I want to reduce it. Is it possible? The reality is that the only thing we can expect from her is to manage corruption, not to get rid of it. She doesn't come from a platform that allows her to get rid of it, because that will be a political suicide for her to do that. Therefore, we are more of saying that at least what will be the best about her leadership? We don't know very much about how she behaves at top leadership, but we are just hoping again, and we shouldn't be using so much of hope in this thing. We are now hoping that she will be able to make sure we don't have a scandal every week. At least she will not break things when it comes to the policy and the institutional framework. But can she really take the country to another level? When you look at the people who are surrounding her, do you really see the genius of policy there? I think that's a question.
Yeah. You wanted to add?
I think to answer Ralph's question, I mean, Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma has already failed dismally as a leader, in my opinion. Because if she really wanted to challenge for leadership in the ANC or in the country, first thing you do is to set up an infrastructure that will enable you to actually achieve your goal, right? Mm-hmm. So she didn't do that. So instead, other people set up the infrastructure on her behalf. And those people have different intentions from her intentions. So they set up this infrastructure to achieve a particular goal. She has no infrastructure, she has no option but to go according to the dictates of the infrastructure that they've set up. So what kind of a leader would that be? I mean, we would have a situation where she becomes the president of the ANC, becomes the president of the country, goes according to the dictates of other people because she has no foresight of what is required of her to achieve a goal and then set up the instruments to do that. So that's a risk for me. It's already a big risk for me in terms of her, as far as her campaign is concerned, because that infrastructure constrains her in terms of what she can do once she becomes president.
And people don't campaign for you for nothing. There's
no, of course.
Expectations of ministerial positions, there's expectations of tenders, as you say. But then Cyril Ramaphosa, has he put in enough in this campaign to actually stand a chance to win it?
Again, you see, this is the similarity about the two candidates. They've got no primary constituency of their own. They are going into an already existing camps within society. The Jacob Zuma camp exists within South Africa. It has been there for a while. It has been consolidated. It has got the Premier League and so forth. Mr. Ramaphosa is going into the anti-Zuma camp that exists as far back as 2007. Actually, he could
has lost.
He could be accused of betraying that camp in 2012 when he went and accepted to be the deputy under Zuma. So what that means for me is that there are potential constraints to these candidates. Potential constraint in a sense that suppose Ramaphosa wins this and doesn't get allies at key positions within the party. What is it that he will have to do to stabilize the party at that level? Let's not be naive.
Yeah.
The infrastructure of corruption in South Africa, it has become an industry. Don't think that if Mr. Ramaphosa wins the next day, there will no longer be people who are trying to proliferate corruption from within the ANC. The difficulty with these two candidates is that if either of them, they don't do well in terms of appeasing people from within the party, they can be recalled in a week. Probably the last president who has been able to manage to align the party and government for wrong reason has been Mr. Zuma. These two look like, I don't think they have what it takes to actually do that. They're going to rely a lot on allies, both of them.
So, I mean, we've seen that the ANC first, there was that suggestion that they will stagger the elections, start off with the president, national chair, treasurer general, and what was there's a fourth one. Yeah. And then after those results are announced, then have the deputy president to try and get rid of slate politics, slate voting, but that has now been shut down, is voting at all go. Yeah. So the key thing is who emerges, which slate actually emerges.
Yeah, for me that's a sign of both factions being confident that they could emerge victorious. But you know, I can't help Mahlatsi but remember the events in Polokwane. Many people would remember the role that Mluleke George played. Mluleke George was, of course, in the Mbeki camp, and how when they thought that perhaps the other camp was making a much louder noise in the tent, in the marquee there, they thought that perhaps they should marshal their forces into the stadium there at Teflop grounds to demonstrate that they've got numbers. Mluleke George was like an army commander there, you know, running the forces, you know, like ready for battle, you know, screaming there before the voting started and assured of victory. And we know what happened.
They lost at the end.
Afterwards. So it's not surprising that both camps at the moment will show that, you know, they are very, you know, courageously saying we're not bargaining here, we're going for broke. It's a sign of confidence, and confidence can, both parties being too confident could actually lead into a crisis.
And I mean, yesterday it was quite interesting when we were doing that story about the voting. One of the people in Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma's camp said that for them they had to push that the voting happens at the same time because they were afraid that, you know, Didi Mabuza in particular was afraid that he might give them the votes for the president, and then when it comes to the deputy, he's not guaranteed those votes.
So it will have been a risk for him because it could actually, had they done that, had they
staggered,
voted, had they went that way, I think it will have allowed for a nice compromise below, and that compromise could not have been controlled by any of the president who will have survived. So in that way, the party will have retained control to say that, fine, you are the president, but we think this is who we want to serve with. And in that way, it will dilute the whole slate thing. But again, Mahlatsi, let's not be naive here. The reason why slate politics exist in the ANC is not because they don't have a mechanism on how to vote. No. It's a life and death issue.
It's a life and
death.
It's
about people who know that victory by the others, it means they're going to be in the dark. That is what is happening within the ANC. We also need to keep a very close eye on what's going to happen with the NEC. One thing we didn't do in Mangaung. In Mangaung, when President Jacob Zuma won, they cleaned up the NEC, put loyalists within there, ensuring that he survived until today. So it looks to me that we are going for that. We are going for a situation where some members of ANC are going to have to polish their CVs.
Yeah, somebody has told me that, you know, you can win the presidency, but you need your own parliament, which is, of course, the NEC. But, gentlemen, I'd like us to start to talk about President Jacob Zuma and his legacy, because, as we've said, he is stepping down. He's supposed to give the opening address today when conference eventually gets underway. Last night, he was addressing the PBF gala dinner, and that was his last. He did confirm that he is outgoing. Interestingly enough, President Jacob Zuma says he does not remember making any mistakes in his 10-year reign of the ANC. Let's take a listen.
Tomorrow, on the 16th of December 2017, I will be delivering my very last address as outgoing President of the African National Congress. And I can tell you, when we rise from here, the organization, the ANC, will be as united as anything. I am greatly and deeply grateful on having been given the opportunity to serve and contribute at this highest level of leadership for the past 10 years. It has been an experience, and humbling experience. If you said something to me one day, don't worry, I bear no grudge, and I will never, because I understand.
I bear no grudge.
Thank you very much.
That was President Jacob Zuma speaking there to business people at the Progressive Business Forum Gala dinner. Mpumi, you said it has been disastrous?
Yeah, well, I mean, typically when a leader ends his term or her term, if it was a decent term, analysts will be talking about, well, his legacy is mixed, you know. And then we will say, on the one hand, he did this good thing good. On the other hand, there were negatives. But with Zuma, we can't say it was mixed. It was decidedly a disaster of 2 terms of his office. From the moment he took over in Polokwane up to now, I mean, his whole presidency was about lies. He lied about, there was a conspiracy to prevent him from being president. State institutions were used to pursue him. Only to admit now, incidentally, towards the end of his last term, that actually there was no reason for the charges to be dropped. In other words, all this conspiracy thing was actually not true. And then last night, in the clip we have just played, he says, no, he can't remember any incident where he made a mistake. But is it not the same president who has apologized so many times?
He
apologized for violating the constitution. In fact, not for violating for causing confusion, as he put it, and not for the violation itself. He didn't apologize for that. He has not apologized for state capture. We know that he lied in the matter of to Lima Donsele, the former public protector, saying that I'll respond to your questions, and he never responded. He went to court to challenge the matter, and then he withdrew the case. So he's been lurching from one disaster to another, and he's been lying from the beginning until now.
It has been quite a costly presidency for the ANC. The factions, COPE came, EFF came, we now have Makosi Khoza, who's also leaving. And now we're at a point where we're talking about an ANC that could possibly lose the 2019 elections.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, it has been a disaster, no doubt about it. You don't easily come across a president who get it wrong 3 times consecutively on appointing one person, the national prosecutor.
A very key position.
Menzisi Melani, Ngasana, Sean Abrams, consecutively. It's like somebody who wakes up in the morning say, okay, how do I get it wrong today?
He says he's made no mistakes.
The thing with President Jacob Zuma, one thing about him is that he has got an incredible lack of situational awareness. He's got this ability to ignore everyone and everything around and march on as if nothing is happening. And he does it with such great confidence that you yourself asking critical question about this leadership, you're going to have to ask yourself, am I mad? Is there anything wrong with, am I seeing things that maybe are not the way in which they ought to be? It's because he ignores people. He believes, I think, that he's being deliberately misunderstood by the nation. It's highly unlikely that so many people can just devote their time to misunderstanding one person. So it has been very costly for the ANC. But I have to say something incredibly positive about his presidency. It's not because of him, but it is the positive from what he has done. South Africa has gotten there quicker than any other post-liberation country within the African continent. By the time Nigerians woke up to the reality that they had corruption, it was all lost. We still have institutions that are fighting back, and South Africans are also beginning to understand as well that there is potency in their institutions. So if you compare us with other post-colonial, post-liberation African countries, we got there quicker, but most importantly, we got to that crisis point while the significant part of our institutions are still holding and they're still able to give us a recourse. The question is, how will South Africans reflect on this going into 2019 election? It's up to them.
Mpumi, interestingly enough, I was speaking to some opposition leaders who were saying, the biggest fear they have is maybe successfully winning the elections and finding that there's nothing in the coffers.
Well,
what do they want to? They want to steal a little bit also.
No, maybe that's an exaggeration in a sense that our budget is quite a transparent budget. So we know exactly what's in the fiscus now. We know exactly how much is our debt because the process is really transparent. There have been attempts to try and conceal the budgeting process. Now, the issue about the president now having established his own presidential committee on the budget run from his office, there were concerns that there was an attempt to hide how the budget works. But the processes in South Africa are such that it's difficult to conceal how the budget works. The parliament must approve the budget. There's public hearings on the budget. Rating agencies must have access to the budget because they've got clients who actually buy South African bonds. So they need that kind of transparency. So it's difficult to conceal things. But where the opposition might be correct is that they might inherit a government which is too indebted. Like the ANC inherited a bankrupt government. The apartheid system had bankrupted the government in 1994. So you had to have gear to stabilize public finances. So the next government after Zuma may have to have its own gear, by the way. Whether it's run by the opposition or it's run by the same ANC, another president, different president, you will have to have a macroeconomic stabilization process to get our finances in order, because they are not at the moment.
They're not, definitely not at the moment. You know, we've had increasing calls for the ANC to stand a chance to actually win the 2019 elections. This conference must take a decision on President Jacob Zuma. They should actually recall him. Any chance of that happening, Ralph?
Any chance of recalling him now? I think that it's highly unlikely that they can do that. If they elect a president and they accept the result, the reality is that President Jacob Zuma is going to have to go. My sense is that he's going to have to go maybe in the first quarter or before June. The first
NEC in January.
The question is whether he's going to be thrown a farewell party or he will be frog marched. That is what depends on this conference. I think that if Mr. Ramaphosa wins as well, there might be there might be willingness to humiliate him a little bit. But and again, we need to understand this thing. It's the ANC we're talking about. We're not talking about, this is not the fight between people who come from different traditions. It is within the ANC. And once this is done, if they have a precedent, they will have to think about 2019. They will have to pretend to agree. They will have to pretend at least to be building something coherent, because when they go into 2019, when they leave here, the opposition is going to start attacking the president who's going to come out of here.
And they've already started.
If Mr. Ramaphosa, wait until you see Marigana class action coming out from civil society and the opposition and so forth. If it's Dlamini Zuma, it's just going to be a field day. It's just a question as to who can fight back better. Mr. Ramaphosa can fight back better than Dlamini Zuma. No doubt from here on, all this alliance we have seen between the opposition and some of the renegade MPs of ANC within parliament, some of them finding themselves becoming reluctant Democrats, it's going to come to an end. It's now the real battle to 2019. The opposition will have to hedge their strategy, and they're going to have to go after the president who's going to come out of it.
Because now we're going to have a situation of the two centers of power. It might be easier for President Jacob Zuma if Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma wins, but if the Ramaphosa faction wins and also wins the NEC, that is going to be quite a serious friction that we can expect.
Yeah, but we have to be honest. It's not going to be easy for either candidate. Both of them will be under pressure if they win. I mean, if Cyril wins, he's going to be under immense pressure, not just from the ANC, but from the country in general. People are fed up with Zuma. That's the country in general. And those are the electorate that he wants to vote. He would want them to vote for him in 2019. So what do you do when they say to him, they send him emails, they send him petitions, they march, they say, now that you have won the ANC conference, get rid of this man. Does he ignore them? And then they say, we'll fight you in 2019. So even in the ANC, he's going to be under immense pressure, because there are certain people that they've blown the whistle within government on corruption. And they can't wait for someone else who was not involved in that corruption to take over government, so that at least they can be relieved that nothing will happen to us. Those people will be putting Ramaphosa under so much pressure to get rid of Zuma. So the question is, how does he respond? Because if he moves to say, well, my NEC and myself believe that Zuma must go, the other faction is going to remind him that, remember what happened when Thabo Mbeki was recalled. The ANC fell apart. And some people might say, oh, well, the situation is actually not the same. This one is much more deserved than the other one. But I don't think you can argue like that with people from KwaZulu-Natal, because their support from Zuma is very fundamentalist. Their support for Zuma is very fundamentalist. I don't think they are prepared for those kinds of arguments. So the question, what does he do? Does he proceed to motivate with the NEC that they must get rid of Zuma, or they perhaps have a settlement where he stays in office, but there's a deal that actually is not in charge. So he's there ceremonially. There's an agreement that Ramaphosa runs everything. Zuma doesn't announce big things. Everything is announced by Ramaphosa. He's there as a figurehead. But there's a risk if you do that, because for as long as he remains president, the constitution doesn't recognize deals like that, private deals like that.
Yeah, the party deals.
It's got all the executive authority of the republic, on his shoulders. He can actually declare war if he wants to. He can declare state of the emergency. He doesn't have to tell you.
Yeah, he doesn't. You can just wake up to hear the announcement.
So the political deal won't have constitutional validity. That's the problem.
That is going to be, and I mean, interestingly enough, we've seen all of these proposed amendments to the Constitution. One of them, the NEC, trying to get back some power in terms of, for example, appointment of public representatives or deployees of the ANC, because they have seen the Jacob Zuma presidency where he just reshuffled cabinet without even informing the top 6 or the alliance partners.
Indeed, there need to be a rethinking of the alignment between structures within the party, on how the structures are passing mandate, and also those who have been deployed in government. Under President Jacob Zuma, we have seen that disjuncture, but also it has happened in a way that the very same NEC did not have any recourse against him. Therefore, he was just a lone ranger doing just about what he could within government, knowing that he's not accountable. Because one of the things that we usually don't talk about regarding the elective, regarding the PR, the proportional representation system, is that it still has some level of accountability. The party is the one that's supposed to have a recourse on the individual. There are certain individuals that no one has got a recourse on. In the USA, no one has got a recourse on Donald Trump. He wakes up, you know, does whatever he does, tweets whatever he does, and you can see Congress and everyone else just trying to follow through, making sense of that. That is the presidential system gone wrong. And that shows that if you go about it well with the proportional system, you have got a good political culture, it can actually work. You need strong, disciplined parties. You need people who actually can build a coherent party. Unfortunately, in South Africa, very few parties are coherent.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly enough,
including opposition.
In my interview with, should we call her Deputy President candidate Lindiwe Sisulu, she was basically saying, you know, there is a disjuncture because the president has so much powers given to him by the Constitution, but in terms of the electoral system, it is the party that actually gets to campaign. And she was also suggesting that there needs to find a way of reining in some of those powers of the president.
Well, you can do it that way, but the other thing I think which is a weakness in our Constitution is that it doesn't actually put additional requirements for somebody to be the president. There's no requirement to be the president. Julius Malema the other day was saying a fool can be a president in South Africa. Anyone can be a president. And he's right, because all you need to do is to qualify to be an ordinary MP. And the Constitution says any ordinary MP could be the president. So Faith Mutambu could be president. Tabile Dlamini could be president. She qualifies. There's nothing that disqualifies her. You see, because there's no requirement that says, after having been elected member of parliament, we now must consider as parliament who must be the president. Therefore, the requirement now from among us, you must have the following requirements so that you can qualify to be president. There's nothing like that. So what has happened as a result is that the requirement is simply that you must be the president of your own party. And your party must be the one that chooses you in parliament officially to be the president. That's all. So the requirement is quite minimal. The real battle is fought here in a conference like this one. So once we win the delegates here, then we're actually done. You know, there's no other requirement on top of that. So that's a weakness of our constitution. They should have said, at the very least, after having been a parliamentarian, because we have got so much powers in the constitution, for us to trust that you actually will use these powers to the benefit of the country, for you to fulfill your oath of office, we require you to have at least the following requirements, either in terms of qualifications, in terms of competency. I mean, for me, it doesn't make sense that you could be the president of the country, but you have never run a spaza shop.
And maybe you end up running the country as a spaza shop. Unfortunately, we've actually run out of time, gentlemen. These were our resident analyst, Mpumelelo Mkabela, and also Ralph Mateja, joining us here on this special edition of Polotiki. We are live from the Nasrec Expo Center. We're expecting the ANC's National Elective Conference to get underway, but as we've said, there's an NEC meeting to try and salvage the credentials when they are later adopted. There are all sorts of disputes around delegates following those court judgments. We've heard from other delegates who say that they were elected by their branches, but they are still to be registered. So what time it gets underway, we really do not know. But you have to stay with us here on News 24 because we will be bringing you all of it live. We have rolling coverage. All of the open sessions of the ANC will be live on News 24. And of course, our special edition of Polotiki will be on on every morning at 9 o'clock until 10 in the morning until the conference comes to an end on Wednesday. But of course, our reporters are also on the ground for all of the breaking news. So do stay tuned to News 24. My name is Mahlatsi Mahlasi, politics editor here at News 24, and hopefully we'll continue to see you as you join our coverage.
I'd like to say to the delegates, I wish them a good conference. I hope they find it productive. I have found my campaign extremely productive.